really hope that we haven't seen the last of CM Punk in professional wrestling. I don't think that wrestling fans are done with him, and I think all the metrics would prove that. It's a function now of what he wants to do next. And I talked about that with Jeff Jarrett last week on his podcast, My World. And I said, could you see him doing something, in Mexico in for AAA with Triple Mania? Could you see him doing something with New Japan and doing something at the Tokyo Dome? That might be challenging because both of those companies have relationships with AEW. So, do you think he does something with his pals at Impact Wrestling? Because he did show up at an Impact show, and as I understand it, he's friends with some of the folks in management there, and he's been there before. He kind of started his career there. Or could you see him, where most people will assume, maybe he does something with WWE? And Jeff said, no, no, no. He thinks maybe Punk could just do his own thing. And I don't think by do his own thing, he means go get a network TV deal and start his own wrestling promotion, but run a handful of shows a year where he's sort of the top star and the promoter, maybe like a quote unquote Ric Flair's indie super show, if you will. And I wanted to get your take on that because I got tagged in that a lot this last week with people saying, oh, you should promote a show with Punk. I mean, I'm not itching to go promote wrestling, but I am curious from your perspective. What do you think Punk does next?
I don't know the man. I never had a syllable of conversation with him, so I have no insight as to what his goals and aspirations are. And I think a lot of it has to do with how much money's he got in the bank. If he's sitting on a pile of cash and he's not financially motivated or doesn't feel the need from a financial perspective to make a move, well, that's a factor and a variable. Um, I, doing your own thing, promoting your own show. I mean, if you're passionate about it, you really want to do it, and it's fun for you, and you like that sort of thing, have at it. But it'll last once or twice. It'll be a failed experiment. It just is what it is. The cost of doing it well and promoting it well, it's such a high risk, little reward opportunity that unless you're doing it because it's your passion, it's probably not going to be a long term solution. I feel a little differently. And again, I don't know Phil. I know the character CM Punk, but I don't know the person Phil Brooks. I I just think this is just human nature. If Phil wakes up this morning and said, and again, this is what I don't know, and says, "Wow, how old is he? 40 some, 30, late
I think
30s?
he's 44,
Okay,
45.
he's 44 years old. He's got another 22, he's got another 25, 30 years of kicking around this planet where he's going to want to have some bucks in the bank, right? So unless he's got enough money sitting in the bank right now where he doesn't have to worry about the next 25 years, at some point he's going to wake up. Trust me, I do it every day. You wake up and you go, oh man, I got to make something happen here. Now, depending on how intense that pressure is on him, determines a lot. But if he comes to the realization that okay, I can't live off of the mystique that I created in WWE any longer. The thing with AEW didn't work out. There's not a lot of other places to go. I like the idea, Impact and all that. Great. They don't have two nickels to rub together compared to what Phil was making in AEW or probably what he made in WWE. It becomes a financial issue at some point. Um, if Phil were to wake up and just have a cup of coffee and realize that, okay, I kind of think I fucked up a little bit. At least it's 50% of my fault. I could have done things better. I mean, we can all say that. Every time we wake up in the morning, we could have gone through the day before and done it better if we really thought about it, right? So if Phil wakes up and says, okay, I'm 44 years old, I've still got 3 or 4 years in my tank of being able to go out and make millions of dollars a year. If I can convince people that I recognize what I did wrong, I want to correct it, and I want to make the most of the last 3 or 4 or 5, whatever he's got left in the tank. At least 3 years for sure. I think if Phil sat down with Paul Levesque and had an honest conversation and just laid it on the table and left his ego back in Chicago and just really had a heart-to-heart, honest conversation and was able to convince Paul that he really did want to end his career on a high note, I think that that's a possibility. I really do. We've seen it before in WWE. The culture has established the WWE culture, whether it's Vince. I think Paul Levesque, I've known Paul forever, but I don't know him really, really well. I just know that he's a really smart guy and he's seen a lot. And I think that Paul would be reasonable. And again, it would all come down to Phil Brooks being able to convince Paul that he's sincere. That's the part that's going to be the most difficult part of whether or not Punk has another chapter in his story or not. I think these other opportunities, whether it's Impact and New Japan, what did they gross? $33 million last year. Gross. That's not profit. That's gross sales, $33 million or something close to that. They're not going to be able to afford Punk in any significant way. Impact, same thing. They just don't have the budget. So there's not real viable financial opportunities, especially compared to what he was making in AEW or, like I said, what he made in WWE. So I think it all comes down to money and aspirations. I would hope, not knowing Phil Brooks at all, I would hope that at some point soon, he recognizes that the clock is ticking, and more than that, recognizes that he is in absolute control of the final chapter of his professional wrestling story. And I would think that he would want that to end on a high note. That's what I hope happens. Whether or not it does, who knows?